Thank you so much for coming to check out another episode of the Stash Cast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people focused on the world of commercial real estate and prop tech. The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict which transactions were going to occur before anyone else? You can with Needle. Come check it out at needle, NEDL.us to learn more. All right. Today, I have my good friend Phil Aftuck from the Bernstein Companies with us. Phil is, I guess you're the managing director of investments. You've increased your title, so
Hi.
congratulations. And they're a firm based in Washington, D.C. that specializes or has built a specialization recently, I think in large part with Phil's help, on doing historic renovations of office buildings into multifamilies. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. And why don't you elaborate a little bit more on my brief introduction?
No, I think that was pretty good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, so I am managing director of investments here at the Bernstein Companies. We're a Washington, D.C. based family office. We're vertically integrated from acquisitions to development to management. Our portfolio includes office, hospitality, and multifamily. I think our biggest marquee project is we developed Marriott's new headquarters on our site here in Bethesda. But what a lot of I specialize in is adaptive reuse, converting office product into multifamily or hotel. And that portfolio kicked off in 2016 here in outside DC. And now we're over 2 million square feet, mainly in the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest, and constantly looking at new deals and growing. But also we still have our portfolio of value add apartments and even some office we're looking at now. So we're doing it all. But I think what we've specialized in is that adaptive reuse.
Yeah. How did you get in? How did you like, is real estate in your family? Like, how did you get into the world that you exist in now?
Real estate's in my family insofar as I think my parents both own their home. That's, that's about it. I grew up in Atlanta. I went to the George Washington University here in DC. My first internships and jobs were all on Wall Street. Actually, my first internship was with Bear Stearns, and we know how that worked out. And
Yeah.
and so I graduated. I became a consultant. I was valuing structured finance portfolios of loans, and that's where my real estate kind of interest started. I was doing CMBS real estate valuations, and I was a consultant. So I think I was 22 and I was already platinum medallion on Delta, and whatever top status at Hilton, and it was really cool. But it meant that my Saturday nights were back here in DC doing laundry and packing and unpacking my bag, getting ready for the next trip.
That's a
And so it
grind.
wasn't sustainable for me. Yeah, I did 2 years of that. And in 2012, I started here at the Bernstein Companies, and I haven't looked back.
That's awesome. That's great. Let's talk maybe a little bit. So hold on, before we do that, did you study like econ and finance? Because I'm a psychology major,
Yeah,
so that's how I worked my way in. But I'm always curious about the backgrounds.
yeah. I was a finance major. I would say growing up, I wanted to work at a bank and kind of go that route. And even today, I mean, whether we're putting equity, pref, or debt on a project, I always enjoy that side of it, the numbers, the finance, the modeling side of it. But now I get to layer that on top of design, development, construction, and actually see the fruits of my labor versus just some paper offering memorandum of a bond or whatever it might be in the finance world.
Yeah. Let's talk about textile here in Cincinnati, maybe specifically. It's a beautiful building. I remember, I think before you guys bought it, it had been just a vacant office building, but I took a walk down 4th Street and I just looked up at it and I was like, wow, that thing is beautiful. So maybe how did you identify the opportunity? And then what was your plan at acquisition?
So I'll take a step back and talk about like how we identified it, right? This was 2010 we bought it. And at that time, the office to residential conversion, I don't know, industry, we'll call it now, wasn't as hot and in vogue as it is today. I think I get broker blasts every day that talk about some office building is ripe for conversion and a great adaptive reuse. And in 2018, you didn't see that. You're right. We did our first conversion in 2015. And so we were in this industry at that point, but it was a small industry. And textile came to us because the broker that had it out there it was a value add, heavy distress office play. There was converters looking at it, but there was probably just as many, if not more, people saying, this will stay office and here's my lease up strategy. So that's how it came to us, right? It whittled down for us because it thought it was a better conversion than to stay office. And then from that point, we started a macro level, right? We find the asset. Every city has great office buildings that set up well for conversions, but that doesn't mean that we want to be in every city. And so we started from a top-down approach, right? Cincinnati is a great market, and we could talk until this evening about all the great things about Cincinnati. It's tons of jobs just coming in there. It's Fortune 500 companies, a young population with a lot of universities. It's great political climate. We could just go on forever. And so that checked the box there. And then from there, we funneled down into the asset, back to the asset itself of, okay, we like this market. We want to be in this market. This is a good building for various reasons. It was structurally sound. The views were incredible. It was in a great location. The floor plates were such that we could efficiently design and maximize rentable square footage and get a yield out of it. It doesn't have parking, but it does have 2 floors of subbasement. And in those subbasements, we were able to put a gym, a basketball court, a speakeasy, a lounge, a dog wash, storage lockers. And we tried to make lemonade out of our lemons there. And it's got a great rooftop. It's got a view of Bengal Stadium. Like I said, I'm biased, but I agree with you. I think it's a beautiful building and offers a lot. But when you take these buildings that are 50 plus years old, that were built to be, in textiles, for example, it was built to be a textile factory, right? And then it became an office, and now it's a Class A residential. So you got to get lucky with what you find and what you can make of it.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the challenges because as you mentioned, you'll get a blast from a broker every day or multiple times a day of, hey, this is ripe for conversion. But that's not always true. It might be a beautiful building, might be in a great location, but what are some of the factors that when you're evaluating a property that kind of cross it off your list?
If it's not in a market that we want to be in, that's black and white. There's a lot of good buildings that may set up very well for a conversion that are just in markets that we can't pencil either on a rent level or local government is not favorable to development. So that's a step one, left or right. From there, does the building set up typically these suburban, you will call it commodity office, 2 or 3 story office complex, these massive cube farms don't set up well for residential conversions.
Why is that? I know, or I feel like I know, but why would you say that?
Because you think about it, how would you design an apartment, right? How would you put a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom along this? How could you get window lined bedroom, or at least as many as you can? And then from there, on a constructability standpoint, are you efficient with your core drills? Can you start at the top and do a drill straight down for your plumbing stacks? Or you're going to have to do 20 times as many because each core drill only goes through 3 floors. And that's something we think about. And then there's also the point of, does somebody want to live in a 2-3 story suburban former office building, right? Textile has a lot of great features. Few of them it's got great views, especially from the top floor. But if it's only 2 or 3 stories in the middle of suburbia, what are your views? Should that building be saved? Would you be better served demoing it and going vertical? And so that's something we see a lot. That's like a quick no for us. These urban core, pretty office buildings that are irreplaceable, those are the ones that just we naturally say, I'd want to live there. I can see somebody else wanting to live there. This is a good spot. Let's preserve this.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about was like column width and ceiling height. Because some of these buildings, you have to put the HVAC in, you got to run the plumbing in the ceiling for the units above it. And if you don't have enough gap between the floor and the deck above. You
Right.
can't have 7 foot ceilings or 8 foot ceilings. You could 8 foot ceilings, but modern luxury product is 9 foot ceilings is what it's called for.
But there you said it, right? There's a million things you'd like to have, right? There's a wish list, there's a must have list, and there's a wish list. And so on your wish list, if you're not getting a lot of those items, at a certain point, it's what do we do in preserving this building? Let's just go vertical, right? It's
Yeah.
if it's a commodity office, just go vertical there. Now with textile, we got a lot of items on our wish list. And I say preserving, there's a historic tax credit, a preservation credit that helps developers preserve these buildings that are worth and necessary to preserve. And so without that, we wouldn't have been able to do textile. We wouldn't be able to do a lot of these buildings that we do. And that's a necessary tool that we use to do development.
So with the historic tax credits, the way it works, as far as I understand it, is you apply, you have to meet certain metrics, you're awarded, and then do you then go sell those credits on the market or do you guys retain them yourselves?
Yeah, so it's a three-step process to getting the credits, right? There's part one, which is the building historic. It's a yes or no question. You work with the State Historic Preservation Office, the National Park Service. They tell you this building is or it isn't historic. Part two, you go through, and that's when you have your GC, your architecture, your full plans ready to go. And then you say, this is what I want to do everywhere. I want to make the floors exposed concrete in textiles case. I want to make the kitchen backsplash this color. I want to make the tile this color. The hallways are going to look like this. You go through every detail. And the State Historic Preservation Office will come back and say, this works, this doesn't work, and you work with them and preserve as many things as you can and preserve the critical things that you must. And then your part three is once you're done and delivered, you take photos of everything and you say, this is what I did, this is what I told you I was going to do, and this is how it looks.
It's like
Along
writing
the
a
way,
term
between
paper
that's right. Yeah. So your part
on a
three is, I
much
guess, your
bigger
diploma.
scale.
Your part two is, yeah. Between your part two and your part three, you'll bring in a tax credit investor. And those investors are the large banks, the name brand banks that you've heard of, who have the tax appetite, right? And the Bernstein Companies doesn't have hundreds of millions of dollars of these tax appetites. And so we sell them to, and the industry generally sells them to
Mhm.
people who do. And it's usually banks. The banks would come in, you give them, let's just say, $1 of tax credit that they can go to their Uncle Sam and get a reduction in their taxes. And for that $1 certificate, they might give you 80, 85, 90 cents on the dollar. And so that money they've given you is helping is essentially equity in your project. And they benefit because, they're your partner. They get that we have a relationship now with all these banks, but the big reason is they get a reduction in their taxes.
Yeah. Do they also get CRA credits for those?
That's that's a good question. I don't know if they do. I need to look at that. I don't know. I don't know.
I
CRA is
think
such like
I
a
yeah,
foreign world to me.
I think they do for the LIHTC credits. I wasn't sure if that applied to
I
historic.
I know they do LIHTC.
Yeah.
I know
So
they do LIHTC, but I don't know about HTC.
the again, the way I understand how the tax credit world works is usually the lender who, or we'll call it the bank who buys the credits is often the same one that lends to you. Has that been your experience too?
That is that to me has been the exception, not the rule. With these massive banks, we're talking like JP Morgan, $1 trillion banks, right?
I see.
They have multiple departments and profit centers and people all over the country. And typically, if we have any bank listeners, they should, I don't know if you do a call in at the end so someone can read me out about this, but typically they have a tax credit department and they have a real estate lending department and they have a different profit center and they just function differently. I won't name names, but I've had one big tax credit buyer say to us, please don't have our guys do the tax. We don't work together.
That's
So
fair.
we don't do that. Where you find synergies is like in Ohio. So you have a federal and a state historic tax credit. You can find synergies by having the same federal buyer, buy your state credits. So instead of bringing in a state buyer, you would have just your one buyer do both.
I see. That makes
There, you
sense.
might get, we're peeling back a layer of the onion here, but you might get lower pricing, but you might have lower transaction costs. But you got to weigh all things considered. But that's where you get efficiencies, not so much on the debt side, right? Because there's lenders out there who are really good at construction debt. Like they can underwrite, they can close, they're efficient, affordable, and the pricing is fantastic. And they might not know how to even buy a tax credit. And
Hmm.
that's fine, because then you have groups out there who are really good at buying tax credit who would tell you there's no chance they're doing the debt on your deal. So it's just,
Yeah.
you got to find the right club in your bag and use it for certain shots.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Because the way that I had understood it, and I guess this probably applies more to LIHTC, is the tax credit investor will buy the credits, and then at the same time they will, because like they don't get the credits until final CO, right?
So with a historic credit, it's a 5-year compliance period, and the
Right.
credits are earned over the 5-year period. And
Okay.
they start earning when you C of O. So they're starting at C of O, and then whoever bought your credits gets them over 20% increments over the 5 years.
Yeah. So it's
Now,
like a handoff.
yeah, it's right. And so when you talk about the LIHTC, there's new market tax credits. There's other tax credits where they'll do where exactly what you're saying, where the people who buy the credits usually do the leverage loan, or they'll call it in that industry. And so to take a step back, when I started at the Bernstein Companies in 2012, I was doing a lot of tax credit syndication, structuring, placing work. We were doing this, our tax credit group here at the Bernstein Companies has probably done over $2 billion of syndication, structuring, deployment, you name it, for pretty much everything but low income tax credits. So that's new
Hmm.
markets, brownfield, historic, different state credits. And we did that. We've done that. They continue to do that. Our group is very active here. And I know maybe we're taking a step back here, but in 2015, I mentioned the first deal we did, the first conversion we did, is when we said we have a tremendous real estate pedigree here at the Bernstein Companies, right? We're building Marriott's headquarters. We have a huge portfolio here in Washington. We have a tax credit group who's done $2 billion of tax credit work. How come we've never done tax credit work for ourselves? And so we made that connection in 2015. We went out, we bought our first empty office convert. And it was a project called the High Line in Hyattsville. It's the High Line Apartments right now. It's right by the mall at Prince George's County. It was a building that was 100% leased to the GSA. They left. It was completely vacant, and we bought it. It's 350,000 square feet. We turned it into 338 apartments,
Wow.
and they're great apartments. They leased up. We did really well, and ever since then, we haven't looked back. But yeah, so maybe jump around or step back. We know tax credits here at the Bernstein Companies. We know real estate, and we put those two things together in 2015.
That's interesting. So you had a department that was doing the tax credit work for a service, for a fee. And then you said, oh,
That's
let's
right.
go and do it for ourselves. That makes a ton of sense because
Yeah.
that process, I'm not good at paperwork. So when I'm thinking about that for deals I'm doing, and I haven't yet done any tax credit work, but it just seems so arduous, so intimidating.
You're dealing with the state and the federal government, and layer in lenders and investors. There's a million different levers you've got to pull and stay on top of. But we were really fortunate that we had done that as a service for hundreds of other developers all over the country, and had worked with every single bank who ever touched a tax credit. We pretty much worked with. And so when we did our first deal, we had a really good database to say this worked out well for this guy over here, and this worked out well for this girl over here, and we could really do that. And I think when we did our first deal, we called one of the bigger tax credit buyers, and they said, "Who's this deal for?" And we said, "Us." And it was a weird moment, but I think now we've made a name for ourselves in that space, and the office conversion to hotel, conversion to residential market is huge now, just because of
Yeah.
coming out of COVID and what's happened with office, right? I mean, everyone's an office converter, right? Rather, you have to be one. And it's something that people are talking about and it's getting great press, right? There's people that say they'll never work here or we're going to look at it for every deal. But I think as long as people are talking about it, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people are either, it's like in the late 20 teens, seemed like everybody and their brother was an overnight syndicator buying value add
Yeah.
multifamily garden style. And now they're either building single family for rent or converting office buildings.
Everyone's a converter. It's funny when we would look at like when we look at textile and we would bid, probably two-thirds of the bids might have been from opportunistic office players, right? Value add office players. Our half would have been from converters, and we knew all of them, right? I knew who I was bidding against. I knew
Hmm.
who the big office converters were back then, and now an office will get 16 bids, 15 of them for converters, and I've never heard of 10 of them, and so this is great, good for you, and we'll see what happens. I know there's one that's delivering here in Washington. That's I think the first. It's not using historic tax credits, but it's right on L Street. It's beautiful. I toured it, and it's incredible. It's right downtown. I don't want to say too many good things about it, but it's a great project, and I think and I hope they do really well. I hope they do well. But I was talking to a colleague of mine. I said I think they'll do really well. They have a really pretty building in a great location. They should do really well. But then I said that's probably a bad thing for us because if they go out and get $5 plus square foot rents and just hit it out of the park, then everyone's going to say, oh my gosh, I've got to do this conversion. Let's go buy up every office in Washington and convert it. We're paying attention to that one, but I think they'll do well and I'm rooting for them.
Yeah. So you mentioned rents per foot. What sort of, when you were, I have two questions actually. One, in a competitive bidding situation, how were you guys able to set yourself apart? And then two, the other one I was going to ask is what sort of rental rates do you need to make a project like this work? Rental rates and then maybe other incentives, because it seems like doing an office conversion without tax credit seems like a bold move. And maybe you can do it if the rents are
Yeah.
there, but
You can do it if the rents are there, but if you do it and the rents are there, then your construction cost is a lot higher. A conversion in Manhattan with no HTCs, you're going to get high rents, but your cost is going to be 10 times of what it is in Cincinnati. And so it's a blend. I don't mean to have a vague answer, but it's a blend in that uh, Ohio has a federal, obviously, and a state credit. And so you compare that against another state that just maybe has obviously federal credit to offer. And so apples to oranges there in that kind of comparison.
mhm.
Otherwise, we'll look at things like a real estate tax abatement being different than a credit. And so an abatement is simply saying to the local government, you have a office building here that is effectively worthless. It may not be leased at all. It might be 20%. It might even be 100% leased today, but it's going to be 0% leased imminently. And local governments have to come to the table, right? And sometimes they do, and they come to the table and say, "This is what our plan is. You check box A, B, C, and we're going to do one, two, three." In other jurisdictions, it's very political, and city council doesn't want to be seen as working with developers, and it's difficult. Right? Cincinnati is very transparent. They say if you come to the table and you do X, Y, Z, we're going to spit out one, two, three, and which is great because as a developer, you can come and you can say these are the boxes I'm going to check. This is what's going to be on the other side. I'm going to take a building that's effectively empty, worthless, and would just sit there and decay as an office building, or I'm going to invest, millions of dollars into this, put my neck on the line to develop it and make it beautiful. And something like textile, where now 282 apartments are, and you hope people enjoy it and live, and it's lighting up that corner of the city. And this city is going to get a building that's worth a lot more than what textile was when we bought it, and it'll contribute to the tax reel in the order of how the tax abatement flows off. And so
Mhm.
it's great to have a city that recognizes we need to give some sort of present value discount in the real estate taxes to incentivize development in buildings that are effectively worthless. Because otherwise, if you go up to a developer and say, hey, buy this building that's really just dirt, bricks, and sticks, invest hundreds of millions into it. Oh, and then when you're done, we're going to tax you as $100 million building. That's a tough pill to swallow, I
Yeah.
mean, especially where rates are, and we can talk about a million other things. But when the city says, do this investment, come here and make this investment, take the risk, and then we will gradually phase in your full taxes, that's a much easier pill to swallow. And oh, by the way, when they say this is a transparent way to do it, it's not going to be a deal by deal basis. We're not going to come and make you show up and throw things at you at a city council meeting and you see where the chips fall on the other side. It's very much you do this, you get that. It's not who has a better relationship with the mayor or who plays golf with the city council person. It's just super transparent. And the more transparent, the better. And so I think that's one of the great things that Cincinnati has that a lot of other jurisdictions do not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that risk or the unknown that makes deals really tough. And sometimes I think that these elected officials don't fully understand, I guess, how the deals work. And no, we don't, like you said, we don't want to be working with a developer, but it's your alternative is just a vacant building. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's almost like they're trying to will their hopes into reality by denying change. And that's not going to work. Like offices, there's like retail went through, we'll say in air quotes, an apocalypse a few years ago. It stabilized. In office, there will always be a place for in office. I'm in my office right now. I come in every day. But office is changing. We're probably overbuilt as far as that's concerned. So it's just that's
I,
interesting.
I agree. And to take a step further, every building, every office building shouldn't be converted. If you, let's just say you took every office building in Washington, D.C. and you converted it into multifamily, there would be no reason to live in Washington, D.C. You want to live by places where you work and where you go out. And you brought up retail. That's a great point. Office is completely struggling right now. Retail stabilized. And so look at downtown Cincinnati. It has a very vibrant retail area, whether it's the banks or OTR or anywhere downtown. Our tenants at Textile like to go out to restaurants and bars where they can walk to. And if they didn't have that, plus if they could just work from home, why be downtown? And that's something that a lot of in Washington's struggling with that right now. Bars and restaurants are doing well. Office, we all know where that state is. And so it's a tough value proposition to say to somebody, hey, come downtown, live in a one bedroom apartment when you can work from home and there's really nowhere to go out to eat or have a drink. And so we need a three-pronged kind of ecosystem for all things to be healthy, right? Multifamily is healthy right now, but if it's the only thing that's healthy, eventually it won't be, at least in
Yeah.
urban areas.
Yeah. Yeah. You need a balance. It's the ultimate dream of live, work, play, so to speak.
Right. That's
And
right.
being in an urban core has that. You've done some projects in other cities here in Ohio. How are those faring as compared to textile?
We are under development project in downtown Columbus, and we will deliver 409 units with a rooftop amenity, a gym, restaurant. This building's got it all. It's the Continental Center at 150 Eastgate. It's right downtown. It's a really beautiful building. It was a former AT&T office building that we purchased, and it's using historic tax credits. And I saw some videos last week of some of the units that are getting finished out, and it's really beautiful. It's 26 stories. It'll have a pool on the roof, so it'll be a great spot to watch the fireworks on the 4th, and it'll really be something special. I'm excited to deliver that a little under a year from now. If my GC is listening, I'll tell them early 2025, but between us, maybe April, May of 2025.
Yeah. Back to textile. How did the lease up go? Did it go according to schedule? Were you getting the rental rates that you projected?
yeah, everything is going great. We're not stabilized yet. I think we delivered in June of last year, and so we're right at that, almost at that 12-month mark where we'd like to see at least stuff. But you're talking about 282 units almost
Hmm.
leased up in 12 months, and getting right around the rent that we were projecting. There's some units that we have concessions on right now that are maybe the tougher to lease layouts, but generally, I think the location, the amenities, and the building speak for itself. And I got to give a shout out to our leasing team. Uh, they're awesome. I was there last week, and I'm always impressed by a leasing manager when especially a building of that size, when they know everyone in the building, they know their unit number, they know their name, they know where they work. And I was there, and our leasing manager, Martin Horn, just knows everybody in that building. That was something like I can't even tell you what I remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but he knew everyone in that building. And to me, that was so impressive. And I think a lot of our success there is due to people on the ground.
Yeah. Management is key to really any operation, but especially in multifamily. Like if you don't manage it correctly, you can have the greatest product, but if you're neglecting tenants' requests or not responding, not picking up the phone when they call, that's a road to
Yeah.
ruin.
And we self manage textile. And but you're right. When a prospective tenant calls on a Thursday afternoon to set up a leasing tour for Friday morning, and if you don't pick up the phone, you should call somebody else. It's at the end of the day, we have a product to offer, and we need to go out there and execute on our business plan. So yeah, you're right. It's a lot of on the ground.
Have you found that a particular unit type leases better or faster than others? What's the most popular sort of thing?
We have generally found we always say that our best amenity is our price. And so by that, we're cognizant in our development and our design, not to over design, because then if you over design, over amenitize, over develop, everything's a factor of at the end of what a return needs to be. And so we want to offer the best product we can, but also keeping in mind that the first best thing we'd like to offer is a good price to our tenants. And that all said, usually our cheaper one bedrooms lease first. People want to live by themselves, but they don't want to pay a lot, which go figure, right? And
Yeah.
so our one bedrooms that are kind of like 500 to 550 square feet that we can rent for the lowest amount, those go first. Conversely, our bigger one bedrooms, right? One bedrooms that might be for a couple or one bedrooms dens, those are the ones that we have concessions on that are a little bit harder to lease.
And do you make up for, okay, the unit might be a little smaller, but look at all these amenities and shared space that is available. That's the trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah, you're downtown, right? And so you're in a building where you can go downstairs, you can book your own conference room, you could work from there, you can go to the gym, you can go to the lounge and watch TV, you can go to the golf simulator and enjoy that. And you've got your own unit, right? You don't have a roommate that's in your way, and you're in the middle of downtown Cincinnati. And so that's the sales pitch there. We were in suburbs of Ohio and you couldn't walk to a million bars and restaurants, and maybe didn't have those amenities, then yeah, you would need a bigger unit. And maybe in that case, it's more of the single family build to rent kind of market. That's not our background.
Yeah. A few years ago, the state of Ohio, and maybe it was the federal government too, I don't know, but there used to be this almost double dipping of tax credits with LIHTC and historic. And they said you can't do that anymore. And I feel like that's a good thing because these old buildings, I think saying, okay, we have a concentration of historic buildings that have been renovated using both LIHTC and historic preservation credits. But I think having market rate as a development style as well is really important. So I'm glad that you guys are out there doing things like that. Let's see.
I'll go out on a limb and talk about affordable and market rate here. When we talk about affordable, like capital A, and market rate, we typically like to go out and say our units are workforce. Our units aren't, we're not this isn't the Joe Burrow unit where the superstars live, and this isn't low income. right? Because there is a low income, there's a low income credit, people build low income products. Consequently, people build super luxury product, and
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
great
right
too.
across
But
the street
we,
from you guys is a product like that.
it's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
We built something for everyone in the middle, right? And so whether you just graduated from college and you're looking for your first apartment, or you're leaving a McMansion in the suburbs and you want to be downtown, or whatever the case may be, we have a product for you. And we're that middle sect. Now, we're that kind of, and it's a perfect balance, right? We have a product, the market has the price, right? And I think we offer a great value for what we charge. Where we get into imbalance here is if some government body, right, agency puts their thumb on the scale and says, this needs to be X percent of this percent of capital A affordable. Then the other part of the building then naturally needs to go up. And so that's when you mess with the scale, that's when it's difficult, and that's when it's challenging. That challenge aside for a second, what it's also challenging is then somebody walks in the door, and then you have to screen them on income, and you have to make sure they fit this box of not making too much, but just enough, right? And you've got to go into here, and then if the rent is subsidized or even artificially lowered, it's a red tape nightmare for our leasing managers, for our asset managers. It generally results in units being vacant because you have to find the specific tenant to fill the specific unit that has to be a
Right.
certain level. And I don't mean to sound like a free market capitalist here, but it just does better when you encourage development, you put on supply, and the market kind of sets the prices for the middle, right? You always need affordable. There'll always be the luxury, but you let the kind of the market builds and supply that middle ground.
Yeah. There's that.
I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I agree with you. And you put it in an interesting way. I hadn't thought about it like that, where if you're forcing somebody to lease units at, say, 60%, you have to have a certain percent of your units at 60% of AMI. Well, of course, that's going to force the rents on the other units to go up to compensate for that. And
It does. And then when people do market studies, you don't generally include the capital A affordable units in your market studies. You include the market rate. So your market rate has then gone up. So then when other developers see it, they say the market's higher than maybe it naturally is. And so you've created higher rents by forcing some units to be lower. You have forced other units as a secondary effect to be higher. And the market, other developers look at that non-capital A affordable. And so I don't think it's a great strategy for cities who are front and public saying, we want more supply. We have a housing crisis. There's a housing shortage. We want more supply. The way you get more supply is not by putting a gun to every developer's head and saying 20, 30, 40% of your units have to be capital A affordable, because then developers just say, I'll pass and go to markets where the market rent might be lower, but there's not this kind of finger on the scale of what the market should be.
yeah. What sort of technologies have you used in your practice, and how are you using them? Or have you found, or are you just doing it all the hard way?
Does Microsoft Excel count? I don't know. We try to use as much as we can, and that's probably a better question for our head of asset management, who is constantly introducing new technologies and new ways of either doing market studies or tracking rents or tracking performance, and also answering questions for me when I can't figure out how to log in or to do something. They have to double as asset management and IT for me. We use a lot of that. It seems that every other year something there's a new. I think we use Yardi, and we're always tracking kind of our performance and what our initial budget was and how we're doing, if we're off, why we're off. But the biggest name brand besides maybe CoStar would be Yardi. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. Microsoft Excel for me.
Yeah. Hashtag value add through Excel.
That's right. Yeah.
Phil, this has been awesome, man. You're the man. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day and having a conversation. If somebody's got like a killer office building that is in a state or a city that is ready, willing, and able to participate in the redevelopment of that project, What is the best way for somebody to reach out and get in touch with you?
You could email me. My email address is P and then my last name, AFPUCK at tbco.biz, B-I-Z. So send me an email and we'll check it out.
Awesome. Next time you're in town, let me know because I only have seen the project like still mid construction. So I'd love to have you show me around.
I'd love that. And we recently acquired another building just across the street at 151 West 4th, the Hooper building. And we're serious when we say we really love Cincinnati. And I'd love to show you both buildings.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we'd love to get a beer with you.
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling. And the other thing, the great thing about yours, you mentioned at the top, we don't have parking, but there's a parking garage literally right across the street from you. And a parking lot that is going to now be the convention center hotel, which that's only, I feel like those things are only going to contribute to the value of the opportunities that you guys have there. So you're in a great spot right there.
I hope so. Yeah, no, I agree with you. But we talk these old buildings. The majority of these old buildings, they're either way overparked or have no parking. Textile, zero parking. Hooper has zero parking. We bought a building in Kansas City that's going to be 260 apartments. It was an old, also an AT&T building that has, I think, 600 parking stalls. And like, so it has way too much parking. And these old buildings, they're just either, there's no right amount of parking that they've got now for today's
Yeah,
users.
I just saw a headline in one of the publications that some office tower that had previously sold for 350 million just sold for 60 million because it and the backstory, it doesn't have any parking. And it's oh my gosh. Whew.
You know, we're very bearish on cars, and so not a lot of our buildings have parking. We're downtown. I think I took a scooter last time. I was in
Yeah,
Kansas City. I took a scooter.
there's
Yeah,
birds all
who needs
over.
cars?
It's great. Birds and
Yeah, who
limes.
needs cars?
Awesome. All right, Phil.
Anyway,
Thank you so much, my friend, and have a great rest of your day.
yeah, you too. Take care, Stash.
All right.